So yeah, I'll be talking about how do you automate your workflows that are, on GCP using Prefect, and we'll know what exactly Prefect is. So before I do start a talk, I would like to set a expectation that what this talk is going to be and what this talk is not going to be, right? This talk is going to talk about what workflow orchestration is, and I don't have slides on what is the differentiation between data flow orchestration or data orchestration and workflow orchestration, but I'm going to give you a one-liner differentiator so that the term data orchestration is not right technically. We have seen in a lot of blogs or videos, but that's not the right convention to use it. That's very confusing term. Again, and then we'll talk about what Prefect is, how to use it. We'll see on the local machine. And then we'll see how you can use Prefect to automate bunch of tasks, or in fact your workflow task on GCP. Okay, so again, since I wanted to skip this particular slide, but then I see that a lot of people don't know what exactly workflow is. In simple terms, let's say you have a number of repetitive tasks that you want to perform on daily basis, or let's say on some intervals, right? Now, once you club them together, it becomes technically a workflow, and then when you run it, it becomes a workflow run. So that's how it is, the basic definition of workflow is. And thank you. And same goes for data flow. Technically, data flow is nothing but the movement of your data. I'm not talking about your data nodes, right? Data from one node to another node, or from one component to another component. That's a very simple definition of data flow. Clear? Okay. Now, what exactly orchestration means? Have you seen the orchestra where a person orchestrates the entire program, okay, how to do music and all? I don't know the technical terms of music, so I'm just trying to explain in this way. So technically consider that, right? And now fit that logic or analogy in your system where you have to execute bunch of tasks in sequence, in order, in parallel execution and whatnot. So a tool that takes care of it, right? Running it, scheduling it, monitoring it, if something fails, retry it, alerting and all those things, right? So a tool that takes care of it, you can consider that as a workflow orchestration tool. And orchestration basically means managing all those things that I talked about, right? And the differentiator between when you see someone or heard someone saying that, hey, this particular tool, it's data workflow orchestrator, that's a wrong term. Because technically, when you say workflow orchestration, technically you are kind of touching the nodes where your data is. You're transferring data or processing data from one node to another node, or one component to another component, right? You are not orchestrating the data nodes, right? So that's not a data orchestrator when you talk about it. So probably you can say that, okay, if some warehouse tool or data warehouse tool has those features where it takes care of things internally, probably you can call them as data flow orchestrator. But a good term would be to use data processing workflow, or data workflows, something like that, but not the tool itself. So that's a major differentiator. And I get annoyed when people say that, okay, I am using this tool and it's a data orchestrator tool. I mean, it's not possible. Because technically you are just touching the data on any particular node. So to start with the agenda, we talked about what exactly workflow orchestration is. Since it was a very easy to understand in simple terms, so we covered that. We'll talk about what our existing tools are, and then we'll dive into Prefect and see that how Prefect can be used in conjunction with GCP to automate your workflow or task. So my name is Abishek. I work as a developer advocate at Dozer. And Dozer is data API backend that gives you considered as a black box where you can connect multiple data sources, and it can generate all the APIs on the fly for you. It's just you have to provide one YAML config, and then it takes care of gRPC and REST endpoint, all the stuff. And I'm a Python developer. I've been doing, and yeah, recently interested in Rust. I've started learning that. So I've been doing Python for like a very long time, like I would say around 7 years or so. And I run few community chapters in India, few GD chapter, and then few open source across India and APAC region. And I'm a 1x engineer. If you don't know what's that, it means that I actually copy paste all sorts Stack Overflow codes and snippets. So yeah, so that's it. And if you want to connect with me over internet, this is my common username. You can go ahead and connect with me. And if you want to know more about Dozer, that's URL there. Now, it's time for sipping some water. So, very popular tool, Apache Airflow. How many of people have heard of it, Apache Airflow? Wow. So it's more number of hands raised as compared to what workflow orchestration means, but okay, that's very cool. Can anyone tell me how have you used Airflow? I'm interested in knowing that. Do you have mic? Extra mic, do we have? No? Anyone? Yeah, 1 second there. And I forgot to mention one thing in the agenda, that there is going to be 1 minute rant about Airflow as well.
Not an expert at that. I've just created DAGs probably, and I've used them to
automate tasks.
Yeah, automate my tasks.
Okay. That's okay. And what kind of tasks were it?
Like basic data engineering process. Yeah.
Okay. So in fact, Apache Airflow is one of the pioneers who technically came or coined the term workflow as code, because you can actually route. So previously, the workflow used to mean you write some bunch of bash scripts, right, or cron jobs to automate on daily basis, something like that, right? But the problem with that is it was very hard to manage, maintain, I would say, and then monitor and then get an alert based on what the task is running, not running, failed or not failed, right? So I like the idea, of course. Again, I'm not going to do a lot of rant about it. So Airflow basically come up with giving you ability to do workflow as a code. So you can write Python code to run your workflow or design your workflow. And how it does is basically it gives you an abstraction layer so that you can write code in terms of DAGs. Direct acyclic graphs, basically consider it as you have 2 to 3 tasks, consider each task as individual nodes and they are connected. The only difference would be that there won't be any circular path between any of those nodes, right? That's why it's called DAG. And they have its own implementation, okay. They have its own implementation. How do you write DAG? They have rules and all those things. And I'll talk about that, why I don't like it. And then there's something called Dagster and Prefect and Kubeflow, and today we are going to talk about Prefect. And Dagster and Prefect, you can consider it as a modern data stack orchestrator and how easy it is as compared to our legacy Airflow orchestrator. And Kubeflow is again there if you want to run your Python code on Kubernetes or orchestrate that. I have not used Kubeflow, but this is again very popular in, I've seen a cloud ecosystem. Now, to give an example what a workflow is, it sounds very easy when I talked about it, but to give you a visual explanation, let's say you have a task of, I would say, workflow of user onboarding. Of course, it includes multiple stages, right? So let's say you have user registration, then you have to validate those data, and then once the validation is done, you send an email. And each task, or in fact, each workflow could be divided into multiple tasks. And if you have user registration, how do you want to store it and all those things, right? So when I say workflow run, it means that the number of tasks or when you execute an entire workflow and number of tasks that are involved in those inside that workflow are called workflow runs. So this is like a very basic layman term example, I would say. But again, when you talk about data engineering problems, instead of consider as you build data pipelines and you want to communicate between those data pipelines using those tasks. So whether to, let's say, collect the data, transform it, a traditional ETL process, I would say. So yeah, the runtime that I like most about, because I had nightmares using Airflow previously, and why not to use it? So technically, this is exactly me. I used Airflow for a month, and I had a really bad experience because it was not easy to get started. So if you don't know, Airflow has majorly three components where you have a scheduler, web server, and executors. So what happens is you have to run all these things to make sure your DAG runs, right? And in fact, to configure a DAG, it's very vague. Like even if you write a code, if you are a beginner for Airflow, it's not as easy as writing a Python code. You have to write a DAG in a form that they have decided, the definition, right? And you start, and once you run it, you'll be like, oh, wonders, where my DAG is, I don't know where it is running. Because there are a lot of steps involved. So again, it's not like, of course, there is a learning curve with a lot of tools. I did not like it. I wanted to do some quick automation from syncing bucket data from one bucket to another bucket from different account, and it did not let me do in a very easy way. That was one thing. Second, the deployment part of Airflow is very tricky. Because you have to take care of, I talked about executor. Instead of executor, it's database, because all the metadata that Airflow runs DAGs, right? So their version, their metadata, whatever task you run, it stores in Postgres. And it's an individual entity that you have to take care of, in fact, while doing deployment as well. So apart from that, I'm just checking if it's not more than 1 minute. Apart from this, what I felt another issue with DAGs DAGs of Airflow are like the moment you run DAG, and let's say if there is some error, or if you want to refresh the DAG, you want to rewrite the existing DAG, it will kind of vanish every other metadata that was in the previous state, and then it starts a new execution. So you technically lose the version of previous DAG. So that's not there as well. Again. And last but not the least, looks like this talk is a rant. I'm sorry about it. But I did not like the UI of Airflow, which was not very intuitive to debug in general. So Airflow is very massive, amazing community. If you go on web, search about Airflow, any issues are there, you will definitely find immediate answers to it, right? But the problem is the idea that Airflow was developed initially was from the batch processing systems and then traditional ETL pipelines, like how you can run your jobs and all those things. But if you see in last 5 years, and not in fact 5 years, even if you talk about last 10 years, the modern data stack that looks like mostly that nowadays we call it as a data engineering process, right? Has changed a lot. A lot of new tools have come into the picture, the integration, then again the cloud part of it, how easy it is to deploy and use with cloud. All those things are not really very shiny with Airflow. You have to do a lot of jugaad in terms of, in fact, deploying Airflow as well. So just to keep this thing in mind, whenever, in fact, you're choosing any data a workflow orchestration tool, keep these two things in mind as well, because traditionally, all these tools are also used in MLOps right now, right? In the current scenario, which has data collection, you do feature engineering. So all these tasks have some repetitive process that you can automate using these tools. Now, yeah, this is what I exactly talked about previously. So is to set up dynamic DAGs. You can't create dynamic DAGs. So when I talk about dynamic DAGs, you can't write. Now there is support in Airflow 2.0, which was recently released, but previously you couldn't, when I was trying it, you couldn't do dynamic DAGs on the fly. Let's say you are writing in a while loop or for loop, and if you want to create DAGs within for loop or while loop, you can't do that. Because it has a lot of dependencies on the other scheduler and all those things I talked about, which run as a separate process. Again, you can't do parallel scaling. We talked about version control, and again, event-driven workflows are not possible with Airflow. Entering Prefect, okay, one of my favorite tools I have used so far, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. Again, it's a workflow orchestration tool that focuses mainly on modern stack, and just very easy to get started with. Even if you go on documentation of your Prefect, just install it. The best part that I like about Prefect, it's you can just write one simple Python code and just add a decorator on top of it, and it will run as a flow. Again, if you want to do multiple tasks within the same flow, you can do that as well with the same decorator, with a different decorator called task, and include in the same flow, and then we'll see in the example, right? So whatever we talked about, a modern orchestration tool should have, a Prefect has it. Now there are two parts, two actors or terms I would say in Prefect that we should keep in mind. One is called flow, which is nothing but considered as a DAG, but not exactly DAG. Just to give you an analogy or similarity between Airflow and this, you have a bunch of tasks and dependency on the task, and it's called as flow. And when you run it, it's called flow run, and its documentation pretty much explains the same thing. And task is nothing but a unit of code that you want to automate or execute. And you can have a task, multiple tasks within the same or different workflows as well, and you can also do subflows. So let's take one example. Okay, don't worry about the script or the link of it. I'll be sharing the URL at the end so we can look into it. So I have a code, a very basic. So let's say, I hope this is visible. Do you want me to increase the font size? Okay, so we have a very basic example where we are saying that there is a CSV file, download it, extract data out of it and put it into Postgres, right? And that's what this entire script does. So if you run this, I mean, you see that it's like a whole chunk of it. You can technically divide this into 2 to 3 parts, and we'll see that how you can do that with Prefect, or in fact as a normal modular code as well. You have Python ingest data. So just to give you an overview, we have one function, ingest data, which will technically download, first of course, the connection parameters of Postgres. I'm not explaining all those things, but here you go. There's a CSV URL that we download, and then what we do is using data from pandas, we are converting the CSV files into data frames, and then we are kind of only from the start we are reading the column names first, and then we are putting it into a database. And we have defined a chunk, I think it's 100,000 size, so that each iteration that the loop, while loop generates an yield, right? So each yield, you will only insert that particular chunk of data in Postgres at a time. So let's run this. It's downloading the data set. Okay, so this is getting inserted into table. And the next that we're gonna see is how you can actually modularize this into Prefect workflow code, right? So I think I'll stop this because it will take some more time. I don't wanna wait, and I have only 10 minutes left, not 8 minutes. So how do you chunk out this entire code base into a Prefect flow, right? It's very easy. So we saw that it technically it had 3 parts. You are extracting the data, right? And then you're transforming, in the sense we were doing some pandas operation on top of whatever data we got out of CSV. And then you put the data in the database, right? PostgreSQL. So that's how we are going to define it. You define 3 tasks. One is to extract data, second is to transform the data, and then if you see, this is what I was talking about, the task decorator that we have here, right? You can literally, each function can act as a task and can be executed in parallel. So we have ingest data flow here, and this is what we have done. We have extract data, which takes out the data from, the URL, downloads the CSV, and then does operation on top of it. This is just to convert those 2 columns in datetime object. And yeah, this is what I was talking about. You import Prefect, and then you put it as a task. Now, here's the thing. Each task can be run immediately as well, and you can schedule it as well. And there are a number of other parameters. Let's say if you want to cache the output of the particular task. Let's say if you have one task which takes a lot of computation, right? And on the another query or on the next execution, if you don't want to do that, you can technically define the cache, its expiry date, and all those things. Expiry time, sorry. And then second task is, of course, the transform data that we talked about. And then third is to load the data. And then this is what a main flow looks like. I was talking about, you put it as a flow decorator, and then after that, whatever functions we have defined here, right? So these are getting executed inside a flow, and we'll see how it works. So again, there are a list of libraries that you have to install before you start executing this, mostly Prefect and Pandas, and PsychObj2 for the Postgres connection. So we have ingest data, flow. So the logs that you see, the logs that you see here is actually from Prefect. And Prefect gives a very random names as well to each flow run, just for the sake of identification. And of course, you already have a unique task ID and flow run ID as well. So if you go to Prefect's UI, I'll show you. You can technically check and debug things. So this is how, so our task run is done. If you see here, it says completed, completed, completed. And if you want to see in a very nice way, you can, Prefect has something called Prefect Orion, which gives you a UI dashboard. And also Prefect has a cloud support. So basically, they have something called hybrid model. So you can run this Prefect agent on your infrastructure. But if you want the orchestration, the other features that Prefect Cloud provides, you can technically host those orchestrator in their premise, and then everything works on their infrastructure. So let's see the UI of it, like how it looks like, the flow runs that we did. You will also see a bunch of past flow runs because I was, of course, preparing for demo. So if you see here, I think that's what's the time? Yeah. So this is like whatever flow run you did, and then in this particular code, I haven't logged anything there. So whatever Prefect gives you by default, it's logged here. But you can do logging whatever way you want. And then another good thing that I have seen in data engineering community that people use Prefect is, I've seen people using Prefect for observability or inside their Python codes. So instead of using telemetry on every level, what they have done, they have used Prefect to kind of log things in their UI. So that's how it is. I mean, that's not the initial purpose of Prefect, but that's how I've seen people doing it. Okay, time check. We have 5 more minutes. Okay, so coming back to the topic. I hope this was clear. I mean, you saw how easy it is. You write a code, Python code, whatever function you want, add a decorator on top of it, and just run Python script as it is, and it just works. Again, scaling and all thing that you can do. I'm not going to talk about it because this session was meant to be how you can use Prefect and GCP all together. Yeah, we talked about it. Okay, we ran the thing. Now, how do you do traditional ETL with Prefect and GCP? So I had an example, right, where you have bucket, the same data that we downloaded in CSV. What you can do, you can put it on bucket, or in fact, you can write a flow to extract, download, and put it on bucket as well. And once it is done, 1 second, I forgot about one feature which I really like it. So I don't know if you saw here in this particular code. In this particular code, if you see, nowhere I have provided PostgreSQL connection, correct? There is no user ID, password, and port and all stuff, right? So what Prefect gives you is, it has something called blocks, which you can write once and use it multiple times. So this is an example of one connector that you can build, right? So right now, since I wanted to coordinate or in fact communicate using SQL Alchemy connector, you can build a connector, a block, and then you can reuse it multiple times. And again, this can be deployed to any other cloud infrastructure as well, and you can reuse it. Because Prefect has this internal implementation where it looks for blocks first, and if it finds in the same directory, or you can also provide an URL of the block, it will just read it and just do the stuff. So I'm using this particular connector in this block. So if you see, I literally did not provide any connection parameters here. And I can use this same block in other programs as well. Okay. So yeah, so talking about GCP. So this is the basic example, traditional ETL, extract, transform, and load. And then you can also do ELT if you want, whatever implementation, workflow implementation you prefer. So the first, so I wanted to show you the demo, but I had some, security policy issues. So luckily, I have all the screenshots, but this is what I was talking about. When you run the particular script, what it does is it uploads it to a bucket, right? And there is another task. What it does is it reads from the bucket and writes it to BigQuery. So the 3-step is you download the CSV file, write it into a Parquet file, and then from Parquet, what you do is you read and write it to BigQuery. That's how it is. So in BigQuery, of course, you need to create all tables and all, mentioning that this is what the particular data type is going to be. So I'm going to show you here. So yeah, that's how it is. And you can find a script in my slides. I'm going to show you at the end. And the best thing that I like, of course, like any other orchestration tools, Prefect also gives you a kind of plugin support with the GCP and other cloud providers, so you can use that. And right now, I think it has a very limited support in terms of only popular services that are there being used in the data engineering projects. They have only those plugins. So yeah, this is what I was showing, this particular script. I can show you the script. Yeah. So we are reading it from the GCS. Again, you can still automate the process of putting the particular file into GCS again. And then basically that will be another function on top of it. And once that's done, you're transforming it, same process that we did last time, and then we are going to write it to BigQuery. And it doesn't look very difficult because Prefect has all the plugins, so that's what I like about it. They have a good support for multiple vendors, cloud vendors. And then this is the same thing here, and then you read from the GCS, extract it, and then write it to BigQuery. Before that, of course, you need to create a table in BigQuery. So you go to your particular project, add a data set, and inside that you create a table. And then you define the parameters, what kind of files, the data set you want to read from. And then you can also provide a URI to the bucket so that it can directly read. Or you can configure this in another function that you are going to write it as a task. And before running the script, of course, make sure nothing is there on the table. Just for a sake, you can delete the existing data that we had downloaded. And then once you run it, that's how your data looks like in the BigQuery table. So, okay, and there's something called parameterized flows. As name suggests, parameterized flows are nothing but within one workflow or flow, you can provide multiple flows, or in fact, the parameter as a task as well, which traditionally Airflow did not support. I think Daxter also supports it. So you can do that, and then you can deploy same thing on GCP. This is the documentation URL. If you want to try it, again, it's a very simple one command, and the deployment is not through GCP, it's through Prefect. So Prefect takes care of whatever scene goes behind the scene. The only requirement is that you have to put GCP credential, the JSON file that you download from your security policy account, right? And put that in the environment variable or provide it as a URL in the code, and then it will work just like that. Again, this was my reaction when I started using Prefect. Again, I had literally a very bad time during using Airflow. I don't know, I have not used Composer as well, but I believe Composer also runs, had Airflow under the neat, but I don't want to give it a try too, because I have used that on AWS and it sucked a bit. So yeah, Prefect gave me a deal and I could not refuse. It was just well-versed. And you can access the slide here, whatever snippets you have, you can go to this particular slide and then you can access it. And if you want to know more about, again, Dozer, you can do that. And there's one small announcement. It's not related to my talk, but we are going to do something called a Appathon thing. Where Dozer, if you want to participate, you can check out our website. And then, yeah. So thanks. If you have any questions, feel free to ask, although the time is over. Yeah, thank you.